We're back and ready to pour more into your marriage. You're here on the right day. Call a friend and let them know it's time for another segment of Marriage Takes Work. Hello, and welcome to another segment of Marriage Takes Work. We pray that you have been intentionally working your marriage since our last segment, and we have a great topic for discussion today, along with our guests, Elder Darrick and First Lady McGhee of Bible-Based Church, Tallahassee, Florida. How are you all doing today?
Good.
Doing really well.
Awesome.
All right. Let's jump right in here. When we speak of the word stewardship, many folk feel that this only applies to the church and what you do there, your service, your commitment to the church and the people of God, as well as what you do as a giver. However, in everything that God has allowed you to have, He expects you to be a good steward, especially in your marriage. Many times we ask God for things and we're not showing that we are even being good steward of what we have. We ask Him for a new car, but we won't get the oil change in the old one. We ask Him for a brand new house, but we won't keep the apartment clean.
Come on now.
We ask Him for a promotion, and yet we're forever calling in on our present jobs. We ask God to send us a new husband or a new wife, but we fail to treat the person in our last relationship with love and compassion. So the word tells us to be faithful over a few things. And He said He'll make you ruler over many. So today we are discussing stewardship in marriage. Today we want our viewers to understand the significance of stewardship in marriage. When you look back over your lives, over your marriage, the many years of your marriage, and ask this question: how does stewardship in your marriage, what does it look like?
Well, that's good. Ladies first.
I would say stewardship in our marriage looks like extending grace. It looks like taking our vows seriously, and living up to those vows, not just lip service, but living up to those vows.
That's good. I would agree with that. And then, I think our stewardship also looks like the fact that Takia is God's daughter, and the way I treat her sends a message to her father of how I view her, right? And so my treatment, both verbally, physically, emotionally, is very important. So I think stewardship is service, right? Really serving the one you're with, and never becoming too high that you're unable to serve and manage things properly. I love the part when you mentioned about extending grace. I think that's so very, very important. Understanding that neither one of us are perfect, and so allowing that level of grace to be extended in that regard. But it's and the last thing I'll say about stewardship in marriage is it needs to be cyclical, recurring, right? You can't just become content and take advantage of that person or take them for granted, but it is a every day you're trying to be a good steward to your marriage and therefore your spouse.
I would throw in the word accountability.
Oh, I like that.
I would throw accountable.
Yeah.
That even as we grow together, that we hold each other to a standard. That this is what we accept, or this is what we are not going to accept. But we're holding each other accountable to how we function as two becoming one. And so we're always working to maintain that standard that God had designed marriage to be. That we work in that thing each day, year by year, one day at a time.
Yeah, I like what everybody has said thus far. And so when I think about accountability too, we have to, sometimes we be in situations, one of us, we believe in accountability until it applies to us.
Oh, that's good.
Real accountability is not just for one person in a marriage, it's for both. And when we learn in our marriage, I look at the love we have for each other, how we are respectful to each other. And as time has passed in our marriage, it makes you be more considerate of your spouse, and you're always thinking about them. It's not just what you want all the time. So that's how I think ours look, going through the love, the respect, being considerate of each other, through each year. It should get better. It shouldn't get worse.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I like that.
Okay, so how does your stewardship in your marriage now look different from the early stages of your marriage?
That's good.
I would say thinking before you speak. Everything that comes here shouldn't come out, right? Especially if it's not edifying your spouse, if it's not building your spouse. There's a way you can have a conversation about that, but just spewing stuff out your mouth, that's what I would say.
I don't even know how to match that. That's it. I've had to go there, right? I mean, I was going to school to be a lawyer, right? So to me, an argument was nothing more than debate prep, right? If you want to argue, let's do it. And even when Kia would bail out of the argument and walk off, I was following her down her street, down the hallway. I was in debate mode, and then just realizing that even if you win the debate or win the argument, my level of winning was by any means necessary. And when you finally win, you look up and realize you may have wounded your partner to get the victory. And so you start really, really thinking about your treatment of them, how your words. So I've grown there.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Mom.
Yeah.
One thing that I was getting ready to say was sometimes one thing I like that we have graduated from, and like Kia said, when you're in a disagreement, that is a time that you will have more of a tendency to just spew things out your mouth.
Yeah.
But that's a time that you should be in more control, because those things that you just allow to come out, they are going to be hurtful, but all of them cannot be taken back. Yeah. So that's something that I'm glad that through our years, we have been able to realize. And I think a lot of it has to do with what you have experienced in your marriage. If you haven't experienced death in your marriage, if you have not experienced hardship in your marriage, you haven't experienced not having a job, if you have not experienced not having the finances that you think that you should have, then what happens is you haven't been through nothing.
Yeah.
You haven't been through anything. But those things come to mold you, and they should be molding you in a positive manner and not in a negative manner.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
That's good. That's good. I can go back. Ooh, Lord Jesus. Go back from the very beginning and look at the time when everything began to click, that I could really look at why we were put together, that I could basically look at and say, this is how we should operate as a couple. Because before that, communication was really not a good thing. But it come to grips to saying, how can we move any further in our marriage if we don't get that part of marriage right, so to speak. Communication is so important. So rather than shutting down, it was important for me to make sure I express to my partner what it is that I need to say, are those things that we need to do to make sure that we are always on the same page, especially when it comes to conflict.
Yeah. You have to teach yourself how to talk to your spouse. It's so easy to be ugly. It's real easy to be ugly. But we have to realize life is too short. And those things that you said on yesterday, you may not have the opportunity tomorrow to apologize for them. They may not even be received because of the damage that what you said on yesterday can have on today. So we have
like
to
said, oh, go ahead.
Oh no. So we always have to be working to become a better spouse. That's being a good steward.
Right, but like you said earlier, it's through experience. It's through the experience of me getting sick and you realizing something could literally happen to this person, and they may not even be here. Or she may go into surgery, and they may come out and say she has X, Y, and Z. How are we going to maneuver through this? How are we going to handle this? And then it comes to the growth point where, you know what, I'm just tired of fussing. Like I just want peace at this point in my life. I don't want to go back and forth with anybody. I just want to go to bed and wake up in peace.
Yeah, Kia has this thing when something is about to brew, she'd be like, "You got it, brother," and you got it. Like, I ain't about to get started with you got it, and like it's you realize with arguments. It's not an argument if it's only one person doing everything, right? Like at that point, you just look crazy. She'd be like, "Man, I got it." Like, but you arrive to that point where it's like, "Man, I don't time for combat." But you made a good point, Mike. I think it's critical, right? It's experience, right? When you've been through a lot with a person, and you grow to learn them, they grow to learn you. You learn things like, listen, the person who can hurt you the most is your spouse, right? If they can say things that can wound you, they also the same person who can heal you, right? So if I'm trying to inflict pain on you, you have the ability because you have gone beyond the wall of vulnerability, right? So you're in that close place where you're able to stick if you want to, but in doing that sticking, that damage that you create is going to linger for a long period of time. When Kia, I can talk to Kia 5 times a day. Every time she hangs up the phone, she's gonna say, "I love you." I'm not thinking about that. Like, we just hung up. Why are you saying I love you? I asked her one time, and she was like, "Darrick, anything could happen, right?" And
that's right.
I don't think about that. But the fact when you've been through so many experiences, and literally, one doctor's visit, one phone call, one encounter, whatever, can change everything. You really start appreciating every moment, and that's experience. Right? People who've never been through anything. In their marriages, like people get married, they always thinking, it's going. Not everybody. People think it's going to be endless sex and walking on roses. Yeah, that's cute. That's cute. That ain't reality though, right? You're gonna get hit with some real life situations that you weren't prepared for, right? I read a statistic that says when a husband and wife loses a child, that 80% of those marriages don't make it. Wow. And it said in that quote, it said that means that the 20% that does make it, at some point, either one of them or both of them made the commitment. I'm gonna fight like, excuse my language, I'm gonna fight like hell, as the article said, to make sure my marriage survives, right? Because both of them are experiencing loss, differently, looking at it differently. But the fact of the matter
is, it's something that
dark periods with each other, right? It builds you. Yeah, it builds you. Go ahead, Mom.
Yeah.
And it's something that you would mention that because I know that, when we lost Jared, we were grieving Jared in 2 different ways.
Yeah. And
so, that affected us. But I realized, I said, we look like we're going in 2 different directions. This God, I already lost my son. I can't lose my husband too. So I had to make an assertive effort not to allow how I was grieving him, which was I was very agitated and aggravated, didn't want to be bothered. And that wasn't going to work in our marriage. So I had to ask him to help me to get through that part of my life.
Wow.
And on the other flip side of that, she was aggravated and agitated. I became the silent partner. That I became so engrossed with work that it would take us away from each other and then pull us to each other. And so we had to come to grips with that thing that we are now pulling away from each other. We got to pull this thing back by any means necessary. We got to pull it. We got to pull it back.
Yeah.
I think one thing that couples need to realize is not your personality that is going to sustain you to be a good steward in your marriage, but it's about taking on the character of God. A lot of times, the reason we do and say some of the things that we say, they are so ungodly. Okay, it's ungodly. But if we would take on the fruit of the Spirit from God, we'll be all right. Because we would be more considerate of each other. We would think about each other's feelings. We wouldn't be out to hurt them or do anything that is damaging them, because each of us gave each other our heart. That's why it's so easy for the spouse to hurt a spouse.
That's good.
Because they gave you their heart.
That's good. Yeah, that's good. So good and true.
Yeah. So stewardship is to us viewing everything as coming from the hand of God.
Yeah.
Everything that's part of our lives, our faith, our marriage, our family, our relationship, our possessions, our gifts given to us with the responsibility attached to treat them as such. Do you have expectations of God if you demonstrate good stewardship in your marriage? Are there expectations from God when you demonstrate, when you?
Well, I would go ahead, Darrick.
No, go ahead, please.
Okay. I would, if I had to say I had expectations, we always talk about when we pray, God bless me, do this, God, do that, God. Okay, but you got to be, in order for him to do what he's going to do, you got to be a good steward. So my thing would be, if I had an expectation, I would want him to bless our marriage. In order to bless our marriage, we have to be willing to accept whatever changes he needs to make in us. We got to let that old person go. We got to ask him to remove that residue off of us that we brought into the marriage from our childhood. That's the only way you can be blessed in your marriage, is he has to make the necessary changes, but we have to be willing to allow him to do it.
Yeah. Where you went, where I was going to go, I'll say, if I expect anything, it would be that God will sustain our marriage, right? Like the scripture says that marriage is honorable in all, and the bed is undefiled, which means the bed is holy, right? It's the realization that in today's culture, it is so easy just to cash in, right? Things get rocky, you just cash in, you just move on. And then the world is glorifying marriage. You got some celebrities been married 3, 4, 5 times. And people see that model, right? I think it's cool, like you guys, and it's always irreconcilable differences, whatever it may be. Then you look back on our foreparents, right? Or just one generation over, maybe 2, where they withstood. I remember my grandparents, my maternal grandparents, right? They had 9 kids, a 3-bedroom. Right. I mean, you think about what they withstood, and divorce was never even considered. Right. You think about that. And now it's so easy to just say, I'm done, I'm moving on in that regard. But it's Lord sustained our marriage. Right. It is that, like, Takia and I in a situation which is interesting. Our son is now a freshman in college. Daughter's a freshman in high school. We're talking about this recently. In a matter of 4 years, right? If all things remain on task, he'll be graduating from college. She'll be graduating from high school. We'll be entering into empty nest stage. I'll be turning 50 in 4 years, right? You're thinking about these type of things. I'm grateful that we, at an early point in our marriage, before we had our daughter, we started realizing, hey, we got to be more intentional about the time we spend together. That's not including the children, because, you know, in order for us to be good stewards, we got to make sure that we are actually investing in each other. We know who each other are. We're also allowing the Lord to do things on us, because at some point, like our son's proving it, they're going to get out, they're going to go to college, they're going to be on campus with their friends, hang with their friends, and they got their own they got their lives. And you don't want to look up one day and look at each other and say, well, who are you? Right? You want the Lord to sustain that marriage. And I desire to see what our marriage looks like when both children are no longer in the house. Right. And we need God to sustain us through those trials and tribulations and those experiences. And the second thing I'll say on sustainability, if I had an expectation, I'm reminded regularly that our children are always watching us. And they observe things you don't think they're observing, and they watch and they witness things, and therefore it teaches them a level of tolerance, right? What are you going to put up with? Like my daughter, I've never seen daddy do this to mommy, so I'm not going to put up with it either, right? And it's just those things that God has worked on me and worked on her, worked on us to be able to think about. I think all that's a part of stewardship, right? The way I come into marriage, I would hope that we are growing and maturing as we advance, as we get older together, and realizing that immaturity is not going to be sustainable in your marriage. You got to be able to outgrow some things and grow up in some areas. And I think all that's part of stewardship. And so my expectation is, like Ma said, the Lord will sustain our marriage. But I think also in that sustainability is us having a strong, serious desire for God to do so. We got to continue to give God the room he needs to work on us to get us to that place.
Well, y'all said everything.
Well,
I look at it right down a little bit in the alley right there, that when we have done as God has expected us to do, those things that he has desired us to do in our marriage, I'm a firm believer that God will honor his word, that because he blesses us and he blesses our marriage, then our lives now become human billboards for
That's
others
good.
to see that
That's
if
good.
God has dealt with them because they've honored the sanctity of marriage and love each other unconditionally, that others will see that they have an out to say, if they fought to stay in it, to win it, I think we can do the very same thing. All we need to do is do what God has set before us, and he'll do the rest. He'll give us what we need that we can move forward.
Amen.
Yeah. I love that.
Well, let's move on to our last question. Danny and I both have lived with an awareness of the tremendous sacrifices we would have to make for our marriage to stay alive and thrive in our latter years. What have you gained and experienced by sacrificing to keep your marriage alive and thriving?
I would say to keep it thriving, I would say we realize the importance of connection and one-on-one time.
Wow, that's good.
Whether that be date night, and more recently, I can foresee us being empty nesters, and our life will look like traveling, because like when we were out on our sabbatical in July, we realized like we really enjoy traveling and we enjoy being with one another.
Yeah.
So I would say that one-on-one time.
Yeah, that's really good. Yeah, I agree with that. It's for me, I've never worried about really if my marriage was ever in jeopardy, but I'm gonna tell you, COVID was Kia and I ended up getting COVID in December of 2020. We got exposed from some people who were careless, and we ended up being quarantined in a room together. Actually, we spent Christmas of 2020 quarantined because of COVID. When I came out of it, I made this comment that I as I said too, that's number one. I said I realized that my marriage is secure, and number two is that we actually love and like each other. I just enjoy hanging out with her, right? I enjoy just I feel safe around her. I don't have to try to be anybody else. It's pretty cool in that regard. And so I think about that a lot. I think about we've had some health scares along our marriage where you pause and start thinking like, this whole thing we built is built with both of us involved in it. I don't want to ever envision if one of us isn't there. And so it's that, but again, it's intentionality. For me, I would tell you, I think God has done more work on me in our marriage than on Takia, because I had a lot of selfish ways and very stubborn and
praise God.
and in my way or no other. Like, you think about that, because truth be told, be very honest with everyone, I only saw really one good marriage in my entire family structure, which was my grandparents. Nobody else. I never really saw marriage exemplified in a godly manner in the right way. I never saw it's just I had uncles who had wives and girlfriends, right? And so I never really saw what that looked like. And saying out of my mouth, I'm gonna be committed to one woman, we're gonna make this marriage work, sounded great. But now when you're in it, right, and you got a bloodline of just walk away from all this, you got to put up with this. Quitting is easy, right? And so it's the now that we've been able to ride through a lot of storms, I'm getting more and more excited about what that looks like, and I think that's important. But also for me, it's just not taking for granted the blessing that God has given. I think that's part of stewardship too, is appreciating that God has entrusted your hands with something that's very, very precious to Him, and treated with care.
Yeah, I think that a big sacrifice is through our marriage was being able to stay on course and do things God's way.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I think we had to recognize was that we were not a unique couple. We're not perfect. And when we can acknowledge that we're not perfect, then we know that we're going to error. And then like she always say, giving grace. You have to learn how to give grace to someone, because you may feel that you've arrived and there's some things that they need to work on, but you got things you need to work on too.
There it is.
And so just because I get to the point before you do doesn't mean that I need to look back and start ridiculing you. I have to give you that grace. And let me tell you something, grace ain't easy to give. But when you learn how to give it, God expects us to give it.
You tell the truth.
Mm-hmm. Well, we are at that part of the day. And as we close this segment, we'd like to let you know how you can reach out to us. Inbox us at Danny and Rhoda Whitfield or Marriage Takes Work on Facebook. You can email us at marriagetakeswork2016@gmail.com. If you would like to share this broadcast with your family and friends and they are not on Facebook, they can join us on YouTube at Danny and Rhoda Whitfield at Marriage Takes Work. Check out our link tree above, and you can get further information regarding us. Remember that you can watch any segment on Danny and Rhoda Whitfield or Marriage Takes Work on Facebook or YouTube if you miss any segments.
So it's our prayer that you have gained some nuggets today to apply to your marriage. Now, please do us a favor and share this broadcast with your friends who are married and or single. Remember to turn to each other and not on each other. With that being said, I'd like to thank our special guests, Elder Darrick and First Lady Takia McGhee, for joining us here on Marriage Takes Work. Remind you, our viewing audience, to love hard and work that marriage.
Work that marriage.
Thank you for tuning in with us today. Now, don't forget to join us next week for another segment of Marriage Takes Work. Until then, keep this in mind. You can only reap what you have sown. So love hard to nurture and work your marriage.